Welcome everyone here tonight. We're so grateful that we get to embark on this journey that is the Bountiful Master Plan. Thank you for everyone for your willingness to be involved. I'm really excited to have the Planning Commission with us in a joint session today with the City Council. And it'll be a great opportunity for us to really look at the future of Bountiful and what we want to see, what we want to have happen. So I'll just turn the time over to Francisco, and you guys can take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We are truly excited to be doing this. We really are. We are too, actually. The first thing we want to just provide a quick overview that the city, we through Wasatch Regional Council received a grant to hire a planning consultant to help us out, to help us write our comprehensive general plan. And the firm that was selected was Logan Simpson Design, and they're here. Our friends are Megan Moore, Joe Moss, and Olivia, and I can't say your name.
That's fair. It's Savetco.
Savetco.
There's not enough vowels in there.
Right. And look, Sean made it, so everybody's here. Every member of the
sorry
planning
about
commission and the city council is here to have this joint work session. So we're excited. We spent some time today with our consultant, and we're just very excited to go through this process. You've received some correspondence from me. You received some email for an interview. Our consultant, they would like to interview you. Have you signed up yet? So we're going to do some public shaming here. Who has not signed up? All right, there's 4 of you
Do it right
who
now.
haven't signed up. We would appreciate it if you guys could sign up. Thank you. I appreciate that public shaming. I really do. Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Gary. So with that said, I would simply like to turn over the time to the Logan Simpson design team as they're going to give us an overview. And what we need from you, we need you to give us your true, honest opinion on some of these questions that they're going to ask us. Not on some, on all of them that they're going to ask. And we'll just go through this. We're supposed to finish by 7 p.m. That's when
6:40.
6:40 is what the mayor said. And that's all I have. So thank you. Oh, and I hope we don't have any technology issues. We did have IT. We had some issues earlier today, but we did decide to try to stream this for the public to view, to continue our policy to stream all of our city council meetings. So, thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Francisco. I'm Joe Moss. Like I said, we'll hop into the presentation here. Really just kind of a basic overview before we hop into some discussion. So go to the next slide. Got an agenda here. So I'll give a brief introduction and talk a little bit about that process. And then Olivia will get into kind of the roles and responsibilities. And then we'll leave it over to Megan, and we'll get into some discussion on what y'all want to see on your plan. So next slide, please. So kind of backing up really just to basics. What is this plan going to do? Really, it's a vision document. You're saying, in 20 years, we would like to see this outcome for the city. So that's going to be a combination of goals, it's going to be strategies, there's going to be a lot of different components that come to that. But at the end of the day, it's a vision. It's a understanding that this is what the community wants to aim for. This is our aspirations and our goals. And kind of the nice thing about that is you get to use that strategy to help shape growth. So when that application comes in, does this fit with our vision or not? And is it going to help us get to where we want to be? Next slide, please. So yeah, it really can be used primarily as a tool by bodies like yourselves, staff, helping to make those decisions, because we all know that change is inevitable. This document is really helping to guide that change. It's not a fixed document, it is a vision, so you can test things with compatibility. That said, there are other components with it where you have strategies. So you say we want to build more commercial or more housing or, whatever that goal might be. The plan will also contain strategies on how to get to that goal. So we'll come up with recommendations to help achieve those points. These are things we'll discuss with you and the community in order to make sure that the ways we want to get there, the ways that are going to work best for Bountiful. And then at the end of the day, it really does identify that long-range vision. That component includes a future land use map. So understanding where you want to see certain things in the city, not just we want some mixed use, but where does that mixed use go? So having that level of specificity will make that tool much more valuable to use. Next slide. So here we are. Okay, so there are a couple of goals that we know going into the general plan are things that we want to make sure that we identify. So obviously we're looking for that long-term growth component and what that should look like. We're going to make sure that the state requirements are covered. So the state legislature introduced requirements for water planning, for instance, into general plans. So we're going to make sure that your plan has all of those things that needs to be in compliance with state law, as well as illustrating that future land use. So like you said, when those applications come in, you really have that tool to say, we talked about this neighborhood in particular, and we've actually wanted to see this in this area. Maybe it's not the most compatible thing, even though this project is really attractive, it's just not the right thing for this. So having that in your tool belt is a really valuable thing to help make those tough decisions. Sometimes there are great projects, it just might not be the right fit. And finally, just kind of helping to evaluate and prioritize those things. So you can look at the strategies and goals and say, maybe we didn't think about this in the plan, but when we look at these strategies and goals and things we outlined, this actually really is compatible with the values of the plan. So being able to use it as a flexible tool, it's not just a yes or no, colors on the map doesn't match. It's a, is this going to fit with our vision and strategy? And it has a lot of nuance with it. So it's not a one size fits all thing. It allows you as decision makers to make sure that ultimate project is compatibility with the city vision and goals. Lastly, a couple of things for implementation. So the plan will also contain implementation strategies and ideas, but then it's also going to contain some criteria for how to keep monitoring that progress and making sure that the decisions and things that are being made are actually in line with that ultimate vision. So I think that covers what the plan is as a sort of idea. We get into the process here. So we're right now in the initial phase, kind of starting to work on the existing conditions. We're going to have some public kickoff events to spread the word, talk to the community, see what they want to see in the city. And then we'll get into some visioning works with the city. So if we have that existing conditions, know where we're starting from, we can talk with the community about what those opportunities are, what those choices are. Maybe they want to see more housing, but then we have to determine where that housing goes. So presenting those choices to the community, forming that plan with them is a critical process. And then finally, kind of coming up with a draft of the plan and presenting that plan to the community, as well as all council members and commission members for discussion and staff along the way. So we'll have those public touch points at all of those key stages. We really want to make sure that this is a plan that's done with the citizens of Bountiful, not for the citizens of Bountiful. It's your plan ultimately, so we want to make sure that this is really bolster the goals and values of your community. I'm going to pass off to Olivia to talk a little bit about some public outreach and some process.
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Joe. Like Joe mentioned on the last slide, in that schedule, you hopefully saw that there is public involvement at every phase. There are multiple opportunities for the public to engage and get involved and check what we're doing and give us some feedback and input We as a firm really pride ourselves in making sure plans are really a community plan. It's something that, you know, residents see a vision of their community and we're trying to make it happen. So in order to do that, we've got a kind of multi-tiered process here. We've got a steering committee and stakeholder interviews, which are those interviews that Francisco just mentioned. We would love to talk to all of you and just get a sense of what your biggest priorities are for the future of Bountiful and biggest opportunities. We're also talking to long-term residents, developers, business owners, all of those kinds of people. Our steering committee meeting is tomorrow night. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Another big thing is just public events, having a presence at ongoing public events, going to where the people already are. And also holding events that are specific for the plan. It's important to head to events like the farmers market where people are going to be and people who may not have heard about the general plan process otherwise, and try to engage everybody that way. We also, throughout the process of making sure we're engaging everyone, we track and monitor all of our participation so that we know what areas of the city we're reaching out to and hearing from, what demographics, so we can really shift gears if we need to and say, we're not really hearing from anyone on the northwestern side of Bountiful, for example. Maybe we need to do a little extra outreach in that area. So we try really hard to make sure everybody's involved, as many people as possible. Online questionnaires and polls, especially over the last couple of years, digital engagement is key. We are working behind the scenes to get a project website up and running with a few different engagement tools, like a living opportunities map that people can zoom and scroll around and place pins on, idea walls, surveys, a few different engaging tools we can kind of mix up, and so people aren't just taking the same survey over and over. And yeah, those are kind of the engagement strategies we like to use, but we are always looking to kind of push the boundary on public engagement to see how many people can get involved. So we can switch to the next slide from this too. I'm going to cover really quick what the roles and responsibilities are for the steering committee versus the public. We get this question a lot because our steering committee is largely made up of members of the public. Our goal with the steering committee kind of a focused, broad representation of the community that we can meet with. We have 7 meetings scheduled in our scope, I believe. So we check in with the steering committee at key points in the process to kind of use them as a sounding board for key concepts and review what we've heard from the public and brainstorm with them and say, how can we turn this into a reality? Another big role of the steering committee is to be an advocate for the plan in their community, someone who can kind of champion the ideas and say, yes, the community is standing behind this, I'm standing behind this, we're building it together, and just to work collaboratively and think big, get new ideas flowing through the plan. And then community participants, we, like I said earlier, that's everybody. We want to hear from everyone we can. We even do youth council presentations and workshops sometimes. It sounds like you guys have a youth council. And really, that's the best place to get our input because the people who live here are, at the end of the day, the experts on Bountiful. And with that, that was a lot of information to throw at you guys. So it's probably a good checkpoint for if you have questions on the process or anything like that. Francisco.
Thank you. Could you go back to that steering committee? That one. Could we say that this also applies to all of the city council and the planning commission?
I think you're right, Francisco. I think that the steering committee, we might lean on them a little bit more in regards to outreach and getting word out to the public, but we're not going to say no if you all want to help outreach as well. And so using email distribution lists, going to events, etc. You'll receive notification of all the events that we'll be at. And once the website's up, you'll have kind of that one-stop shop for all the information about the plan. And yeah, I mean, as much as you're willing, you can have them involved.
Thank you.
Standalone website or will it be a link or a page off the city website?
It's gonna be an individual website. We will include some link from the city's website, the department or whatever, to that website. The website that we've used, it's got a lot of good outreach campaign things built into it. Olivia mentioned it's got the ability to pull up a map and have pins on issues and opportunities and be able to comment on those things about people. So you've got the ability to have more of a dialogue online. We've got the ability to integrate it with Facebook, other social media outlets, create email distribution lists for registered users that sign up and folks that read emails as part of online questionnaires. So it's a little bit easier for us. It's a little bit easier for Francisco and his staff because he doesn't have to manage it, and IT on the city side doesn't have to manage it.
And with that said, we don't have to put a link on our website, to their website. Preferably on a front page.
Do you have a target range for how many public events you try to attend?
Community events wise,
Right, yeah.
that's a good question. I think that's one of our questions for you all tonight as well as on outreach and where should we have a presence? You know, what are the events that we should be at? We've already talked about farmers markets, being at those and food trucks. Francisco's a big fan of food trucks, I think. Willing to get out there. We've talked a little bit about handcart days as well, knowing that that's a big community event, so we're going to take a quick flyer or something to get word out. Other community events throughout the process, though, I think we're looking for that feedback this evening and tomorrow.
And then we expect to have things like public open houses where we do a presentation and people can give feedback.
Absolutely.
Anyone is welcome to come.
Anybody is welcome. We'll try to get word out in as many different ways that we can. We've used papers in the past, we've used radio announcements in the past. You know, of course, use the website and city website and social media. There's 3 big kind of milestones throughout the process. The community visioning is a little bit easier to get people's feedback at those big community events because it's just kind of a quick touch. It's really more of a promotional campaign for the plan itself to let people know this is out there, it's going on, let them know how to be involved. When we get to opportunities and choices and start dealing with the land use map, that's when we really want folks to show up and be involved. Usually we do it through small group workshops, offer kind of a series of workshops over the course of a couple of days and have folks kind of join us in this room for a presentation and small group exercises. And then the draft plan stage, that's again something that we'd ask folks to kind of come to a special event for the plan itself. Give us feedback on the final, well, I shouldn't say final, preliminary plan document, goals, policies, and help us prioritize some of those actions.
Yeah, I could also add, maybe in addition to any required public hearing that takes place at planning commission and also at city council, we're having a series of 4 joint meetings this month. As we check in, probably at these milestones. So report back.
I think we have one for each phase of the plan. So you'll be hearing from us a lot.
And hopefully, I think the main goal is to just making sure that everybody has at least heard about it, right? We're not going to get the whole community to plug in. We're not going to get the whole community to comment on something. But at least at the end of the day, if we don't get anybody up at the dais that says, I have no idea what this is, I've never heard about it. What is this general plan? Now that's kind of our goal there, to not have that.
Well, just ask, this is what you do in your, I love that this is, that public engagement, this is a huge emphasis with Logan Simpson. And I'm just wondering, what does this look like in other communities similar to Bountiful? What type of input are you getting and people attending events? What can we shoot for, expect?
I think this year, we can expect the unexpected. I think over the past 2 years, we've kind of learned that lesson. We're starting to see people come back to meetings. It's been tough across the board. We've seen heavy response on online over the course of the past 2 years. We were starting to see online increase even before the pandemic, and in-person attendance dropped. Through the pandemic, of course, online has skyrocketed. And I think we're starting to see kind of that return to in-person just because I think people want to get back together again. And we'll see how it goes. I will say that we've put a lot of investment and effort in fine tuning online engagement over the past 2 years. We've always got that option. We've got both options throughout the process. If we're not seeing it in person, we've got the opportunity to reassess, do we do them at City Hall, do we do them at different locations? So it's hard to give a great answer right now, except for we've got an idea of what to plan for, but we know we'll probably have to change a little bit along the way. Best. But that is
It
kind of what
does.
we're seeing around that.
That actually is the best answer, because it means you're being flexible and responsive.
And that's, I think in outreach, that's kind of what you have to do, right? And like I said, that it's been across the board. I've got a small town in Idaho. I can't get a person to come from me for anything. We've got newspaper articles, radio articles, and we've got online responses in the 400s for each questionnaire for a total of 5,000, but nobody will come in. So we kind of relied on that. We've tried our best to get word out. We've gone directly to some of their smaller groups, community organizations, and gotten schools involved that way. But it is kind of always a work in progress. It's something that we'll always give an update to at steering committee and at these joint meetings on where we're at, who we're hearing from, how many folks have we heard from, and of course what we're hearing, and then we can always kind of change course if we need to.
It does seem like the communities that have a lot of like community pride and community events, kind of like Bountiful seems like those are pretty well attended. Those do tend to be the communities that show up that kind of stuff. So hopefully the numbers are pretty good in
In the
person.
preliminary interviews in the first phase, is there a period of time then that we're talking about the identity of Bountiful? Is that something?
I think identity in regard to community values. You'll see, I think the questions that we asked tonight, questions that we have in those interviews are, what do folks really love about the city, right? And we'll start there. It's a happy question. People kind of smile when you answer it, right? And those are really the things that we want to be able to preserve as part of this process, as part of that plan document. So when we hear that people really love the trail connections, or downtown and Main Street, and how to make that better. These are all the things that go directly into that plan document, through the land use map, through imagery, through narrative, through your action items, goals, and policies. So from day one, even tonight, I'll be asking you guys some questions, and I won't have to talk anymore. But even what you say tonight, eventually you're going to see that in the plan document, right? Because we're already talking about things that are the vision for the future. So values is kind of where we start. Community identity, it tends to come out when we start talking about future land use, I think, and where things go and what they look like. Sometimes I feel like it's more of a goals and policies thing and can be dealt with in the land use categories and what those types of uses should look like. If you're talking about getting into like design standards and gateway character, streetscape character, if those are things that we can start looking at in the general plan, it's definitely probably an action item that might be carried forward after this planning process is done.
That reminds me of something Francisco said when he said, after we're done with this general plan, then that's when some of the real work begins, where we look at our code and changes we need to make.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We were talking about some of the code changes today, just driving around the city. And it basically gives Francisco a work plan for like the next, 5-10 years. And we'll try to identify those action items, try to dig down into specific code changes that really need to be looked at as part of those action items. So I think you can see a start on that. It gives Francisco that starting point. It's also, if it's part of the action and part of those priorities, public's giving feedback on, it's a little bit easier because you've got that buy-in with adoption. Anything that we can do to make next steps a little bit. Get us further down the road, give you a little bit more to work on.
And finally, it allows the city through my zoning code and my zoning law, to be proactive instead of being reactive. Instead of saying, oh, we didn't like that, and this change is not good, and everything like that. Oh, we didn't like that. This change is good. It allows, it gives me the formula, gives me the ability to be proactive, to try to attract certain businesses or certain type of housing, something that we all recognize that way. This is what this is all about.
Is there more presentation or now are we just questions?
I've got questions for you. I've got a lot of questions. Well, great. But yeah, did anybody else have any questions for us? Process, outreach.
If we have ideas for community events, would you like them to, Francisco share with you, or
Yeah, I think we can talk about them this evening too. But yeah, if you've got a list off the top of your head.
you, a lot of our events obviously happen in summer months. Are you guys ready to really start engagement at events?
Yeah, once we have the website up, it's working in the background, then we can start getting an online questionnaire posted in direct. We need a plan name tomorrow, and that's gonna be the URL. So the steering committee gets.
Well, Richard has that.
The plan name.
Yeah, it's called Bountiful by Design. I hope you observe that.
I don't know that we have that, but we need to add that.
Yeah, we didn't think of it.
To reserve it right now, because someone online might be.
That's right.
I know, so Daddy, right?
Go, Daddy.
Bountiful by Design.
Untakeable.
I like that. That's nice.
It's stolen. I think Palm Springs.
We can get the website up and running pretty quick. So we've got all of the components
in their
together.
latest
We just need to
channel.
plug in names and logos. So hopefully sometime next week.
I had another one.
Yes, I would say.
What?
Bountiful blueprint.
Like that?
Always there was another blueprint plan that was set up years ago.
By design, it's sexy.
Well, that's what planning's all about.
All that matters.
It wasn't stolen. So there's that extra element of danger.
One more exciting of the
Right. Everybody ready for me to stop talking and turn it over to you all? If we can go back to the slides, I think we've got about 5 or 6 different slides, 1 or 2 questions apiece. I was going to try to take notes as we go, just so that we've got it. Like I said, you're going to see these comments come back up, and if you don't, you probably need to know this. But it's something that we'll keep track of throughout the process. But the first one, how we want to start off this plan is identifying at the end of the game, what makes this successful. So, and I don't know that everybody is more than welcome to answer. The ones that have signed up for interviews, and I know by the end of the meeting, everybody's going to have signed up for interviews. So don't feel like you have to get everything out tonight, because you'll have that chance again at the interviews as well. But tonight was more about just kind of having a discussion to start off. We'll go through there. About successes. So when it comes to the end of the day, presenting the final plan document, what makes it the process, the plan itself a success?
Can I just complete the sentence?
Yes.
This plan will be a success if it reasonably balances the competing needs in the city.
All right, who else? For me, it says that expectations in the future. It's like, but one of my
right? So the current plan is that when you look at it, you really don't know what to expect. And I want a plan that when I open it, I know that certain things will be coming and action items will be coming down the pipeline. And residents can have some predictability in how their city will turn out.
So it sets an expectation of quality.
In development,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a success if it's simple enough to implement, but complicated enough to capture all our issues. It's kind of a fine balance.
Probably gets back to that first one, balance and needs too, right?
A little bit, but if we create this general plan, it's too complicated, we can't act on it, it doesn't work. Right. A clear vision, that might be a better way to put that.
Yeah.
Clear,
I like
clear
that.
vision,
Clear.
no ambiguity.
The result of reasonable public engagement. You get some people, at least some mass of people providing input.
So reasonable, more equitable.
Yeah, reasonable level of public participation. Because I think, what obviously the danger is you have.
An unfair representation of the community.
Right.
And that gets back to tracking a little bit, and who's been involved. As Olivia mentioned at the start of tracking by neighborhood. We can talk as we go about who we track and monitor demographics wise. Kind of question that we throw out there. Is that age? Is that income level? Is that neighborhood?
and actually embed those questions into the sign up registration for our website. So we can see even who's clicking into our stuff. If they're signed in.
I think that speaks to this, like, the diversity of engagement opportunities. You go to farmers market, look at a different group, and you have a food truck, maybe a different group and you have a tent. The problem is that if you only go to farmers markets, you go every week.
Yeah.
For the concert series, the interspersed farmers market. Concert series, very important.
There's also Constitution Day involved. And also different groups. Just along with what Chrissy said, I like what she said about the expectations and predictability. I would just add with timelines or, even just aspirational timelines. I would love a good timeline. Then also I would just say anticipates and moves actionable needs, forward actionable needs necessitated by current and projected future growth.
Can you say that one more time?
I wrote it down somewhere.
So that one more time.
So it anticipates and moves forward actionable needs that are necessitated by our current and future projected growth.
My handwriting gets less good.
Still better than mine would have been.
All of these things have to make sense economically and politically as far as that goes. So you've got that aspect of where you've got to sell it. And then you have to make sure that it's economically feasible to be able to pull off.
And that's
I-
something that we can tie to action items as well, and a high level order of magnitude costs for key projects. So at least we have an idea. I probably should have mentioned too, that we've got a series of sub-consultants on board as well for their expertise. Susie Becker of Zion's Finance, and unless you're familiar with her, she's on board to help with housing and market economics. We've got a group called Nelson Nygaard to help with transportation, more active transportation than necessarily particular transportation, because there's not much opportunity for that left. So being able to incorporate bike ped use. And then who am I missing? Ben, Levenshire, DTR or downtown redevelopment. So help focus a little bit on downtown businesses, outreach specifically to business areas, and looking at that in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask Jim, are you talking about economic feasibility for development, or economic feasibility for things that the city might do? It sounds to me that the general plan is gonna be an idea of what the city would look like 10 or 20 years from now, and then we're gonna have, we may or may not, you know, redo some of the zoning for the areas, but really, are you talking about economic feasibility for someone to come in and say, this, I could do a project in the city, or are you talking about feasibility, economic feasibility for the city cost?
Well, I think it's the planning aspect. So, you know, so if we put something forward, you know, for example, to change the planning zone, you know, codes because of water and trying to control water usage and whatnot, and we got to make sure that that's something feasible. And, you know, we're not asking our homeowners to fork over $10,000 to change the drive strip, you know, to our specifications. So it's, you know, that's my mindset on that.
I think it would be helpful to identify services that we're leaving Bountiful to go to. And if we can support that service, it would be nice to be able to utilize that inside our city.
It's more like a gap analysis.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that Susan can look at early as part of the distributions to look at. I think that'll help inform some opportunities. When you start things going to see development. The others ready for the next one?
May I add one? One staff. I think the plan will be a success if it provides tools for the planning commission, the city council, and staff to evaluate and do that.
I don't think
Survives the life.
Wish we could help.
It's very long range.
Super long range.
Next time, we're on to the next question. All right. So the components to include, so like Joe mentioned, there's specific elements that need to be addressed from the state. Transportation, housing, water is not required, first land use, economy. Are there any other components that we need to include in this plan? Other than those that we kind of just mentioned, a lot of these talked about action items and implementation. Elements that are needed to include in this plan for it to be a success. Or
you've already mentioned it, but active transportation.
I'm sure you have the program that's been done. Yeah.
yeah, and that's a good point. I'm not sure if you mentioned that. There is a lot of work that's been done. So one of the first steps that we'll do in addition to existing conditions is take a look at the other plans that are out there and merge them together to see what they're all saying and be able to start there. So we don't want to kind of reset the board, but work on what's out there now and build on that.
The architect is component with the trails, master plan, the trails. When we start talking active transportation, there are a lot of layers. In terms of the users, the designers, whether it's a recreational user versus community users. The plan needs to address everybody's needs.
I was gonna say, I think something that you may need to look at is like the future utility upgrades, like, we know there's a lot of talk of trying to go electric, and the reality is what we have in our city wouldn't handle everyone going to electric vehicles anyway, so what does it look like to upgrade our infrastructure? And what other infrastructures may be coming in the future that we should be looking at or planning for?
That was nice in our contract.
Is it beyond the scope of the general plan to consider our infrastructure is state right now? Water, beyond the scope of what the general plan could accomplish.
Well, and I don't know, that's a good question, but, you know, I don't, and maybe it has nothing to do with planning to, how you're gonna get it where you want it, and how you're gonna best facilitate it, what needs to be, I mean, you know, we talk about setbacks and things like that, there may be things like that we need to be thinking about, I don't know.
Well, and in
Might be
some
something to
cases,
look
in
at.
regards to power, the biggest thing from a land use perspective is where do the big, I can't keep the word.
Yeah, stations, yeah.
Yeah, substations, that's what I'm trying to get out. Where they're at and where they will be at. I think at a high level, we don't really get into kind of the nitty gritty of the power grid, but at a high level, if there's an issue there, we probably need to address it in some form of fashion and make that an action item to take that in the first study.
I do really like where you're on with the electric cars.
I feel like you beat me up on that one.
I
though.
like that. Sorry, sister, I cut you off.
Just taking a look at areas of the city that have specialized zoning and see if that's appropriate and where and how, you know, in what ways would be appropriate to modify specialized zoning areas.
I like that a lot, that's good in mind as well, particularly our hospital zone, they can review our downtown zone, could use some review.
Richard, you did the same thing like that.
Thank you. Alan, let me just pump up our power department a bit. They have been quietly upsizing components for quite a while now in preparation. And we're significantly ahead of where the state of the nation is at large, being able to deliver that power, if anybody's able to generate power. So they're working on that.
Oh, go ahead, please.
You mentioned that it's not required by the state code, but we need to have an economic development component of it.
Maybe reviewing and tweaking the redevelopment area. Could that be part of this plan as well?
Yeah, and I
Or
think,
not?
I mean, the point, originally, is pretty much built out, right?
Yes.
So, and this was even more evident as we drove through the city today. I mean, I have been running this proposal for this, but I think in Bountiful's case, where we need to end up is taking a look at some of the sites for that. And probably I think downtown, of course, being one of them. There's a number of them that I didn't talk about and go through today, and I won't mention them all, but I think you know, kind of getting an idea from the community-wide vision overall, kind of where your suitable areas are. We really don't need to touch, right? Single family neighborhoods probably aren't gonna change much for 80%, 85%, 90% of the city. But where are the places that we can look at? Where do you need more commercial? Where are services not in place? Where are services not walkable? Things like that. And I think we can deeper dive and see those areas.
Well, and that's an interesting thing. It's an interesting comment to say that we're pretty much built out. And I see where you're going, but redevelopment has a way to kind of change your eyes of what built out is. And I think that's an important aspect of taking place. Like you mentioned, what are areas that look like they may see redevelopment sooner, and what do we really hope it develops to? I mean, we have a lot of these older lots in Bountiful that are really big. A lot of developers would love to grab, 4 or 5 lots and do something. But it would be nice to have a plan for if that does happen, what it looks like.
I'm not thinking that one thing that I want to do in the plan, is along with those recent redevelopment, that what the science like does at an economic study, I want them to tell us what type of commercial we need, and what our tax base needs to support a healthy tax base, because when things redevelop, I'm hopeful to not see a bunch of oil change places, and I'd like to see more,
Car washes.
Yeah, car washes.
More car washes and more banks. Can we use more banks?
But that said, if science comes back and says, I guess maybe it's proceeded, but I'd like to see an economic study on what we need for our tax.
I actually love that idea. Really looking at what businesses we want to attract. Because we all know we have a lot of car washes, we have a lot of credit unions, we have a lot of banks. Right? What are the businesses that really we want to attract here?
And to that
How do we
point,
track them?
right, to that point, a few years ago, we saw a lot of frozen yogurt places. It became unsustainable. and-
We only need Nelson's.
Right? So,
What do you think it's in for good for?
Now the soda shops are filling that same.
We had to explain the soda shops to our Colorado coworkers.
One of the things that, especially as we look at places to be developed, is how we recreate and still preserve places for people to be outside and be open space. Our wellness scores, our community members are very dependent on the ability to exercise, to be outside, to get attention to the body.
We likely won't need any more electrical substations, but we may need more open space.
Yeah.
For preservation of the little that we still have.
Or highlighting those areas where people are using them to exercise and get outside and really finding a way to make it more inviting.
Like a lot of our parks might be.
Will you say that again?
Will there be an ADA component? Americans with Disabilities Act.
I mean, typically in the plans, we say that they should all be. But it's not a fine grained study into what areas of the city are not ADA accessible. We need an action item to take a look at, sidewalk gap analysis, to do a study on where those changes need to be made, where those enhancements need to be made. That's probably not. But that's probably not something you would see in. Unless there's big issues in like 1 or 2 places, I think that we probably want to call out. Big highway crossings, high schools, hospital, even something like that. I would say for a little bit of additional resources.
Thinking of open space and development, and if a large tract of land was developed, what is the open space requirement for that high density housing? If it were high density housing, I'm not suggesting that it is, but whatever that housing type is, what is required for it to balance that, the need of its tenants.
You're talking about changing that from what it is now, so you can look at what it is now and identifying whether that needs to be changed or increased.
I think we should, might be we should study it. Are we at the
Yeah.
right level? Because we don't have very many places left to consider for any type of recreational
Right.
use, so.
Selecting the recreation opportunities now. That is adequate for now and for the future.
Well, I'm thinking of for that
where the
development,
songs are, yeah.
yeah.
Well, and if we're trying to think big and think outside of the box, my question would be, well, would it be so critical to have it in that single development, or would it make more sense to ask the developer to contribute to an existing park that we have that adds greater value there for the community overall? A lot of things we face as development is the city will want so much green space that the land, it becomes unfeasible to use and develop, and the price point just gets you where you don't even want to bring a product in. If you have a city that say, hey, we want your product, we need the housing, and we've designated these recreational areas, but in order to make this work, we want you to do some kind of betterment to what we already have, that it improves the whole community instead of small little pockets that really don't get used anyway.
No, they really don't.
I think
They
flexibility to the developer is key. But the rule of thumb is, if we're making our city more dense, how do we make it more livable? So it's not just bricks and mortar.
Well, I think the key to that is preservation, right? I think Kate, you said, well, how do we preserve what we have? Well, really,
I think it's both though. I mean, I think there are parks I think we can do better. Rocket Park, which we should also rename in this plan, so make sure.
Well, the park
But-
formerly known as
but we
the
have-
Rocket Park.
But there are parts of that park that are underutilized.
Yeah.
The west side in particular, the backside with the softball field. I mean, there are areas in that park that I think we should redevelop or add a walking path or, maybe one of the corners is a place for pickleball courts or just there are ways we can enhance the spaces we have to make them more useful.
and I
But I
totally
think
agree.
we're actually short under most land use studies on the number of parks or open space needed per 1,000 people. So I
Sure.
think we need to look at options that might exist to say, let's secure this so that we're not packing out certain parks or certain fields all the time.
Let me give an example. If you go to Maverick,
Which
there's a new
Maverick?
apartment building.
The one by
Maverick on
yours?
Seventh.
Okay, I was gonna say, there's one
The only
there's one
Maverick.
at 5 Points.
I have kind of. So the new apartment building there was required to have the open space on the empty lot north of it. And I've never one time seen anybody on that grass. Never.
Well, and my
If they
point
had-
is,
If they had taken the cost of developing that open space and put a new play feature at
Yes.
some park, something that somebody can really use. To me, that's a great trade-off.
yeah, to your point,
I love that.
pay for the betterments of those parks,
Yeah.
the areas that are
So,
underutilized.
I think there's two parts to that. We're still under what ought to be a national target of.
Oh, absolutely.
Person.
So these little pocket
Yeah.
parks.
I
inside
don't
the
want you to
townhome
waste the
developments.
money on a sliver,
Yeah,
but I also don't want us to grant, for instance, developer the ability to just be like, hey, just buy us a rocket at Rocket Park and you're good. When what we really need is help securing an additional place that has an ability to have sports fields so that the kids who are gonna live in that new development can have the opportunity to play soccer or lacrosse or football because we actually have a field space.
First of all, we're talking about density. I think I'd like us to take a look at all areas of current and future multifamily housing, zoning, and kind of look at what is the density we want to see in multifamily housing areas. Do we have the density right? We know we're going to have, and we have multifamily housing, but what is the density we want to see? Is it R7, R13? I mean, I don't know all the numbers, but Francisco does. And then also if we're looking at the parking requirements, are we over parking? Are we over asphalting? Do we have that right?
Downtown parking, that was something, right?
Oh, and downtown.
citywide park.
I think looking at various housing types, if there's a housing type that we're deficient in, we could accommodate, help with housing affordability. Would be
Yeah, that's a great point, because we're getting a lot of new apartments at 5 Points, but a lot of them are 1 bedroom. And so what options, what's the whole myriad, the whole, townhomes, and, all the different possibilities.
I think a lot of Davis County is a veteran community that's now is for all. I really wish we could find a way to help more of a stay here, work here, live here, buy here, shop here, go to a restaurant here. Make it
That's something that
more
I'm
of a standalone
actually
community.
curious about when we do the vision, because I feel like there's like 2 sets of people in Bountiful. People that don't want that, and they're very, very happy to drive to grocery stores and stuff, and I want that too. So I'm really curious in visiting what will here.
If we really want to make Bountiful walkable, it would take dramatic changes. And I think you're right, Chrissy, there's almost like, maybe there's a way to have part of Bountiful be one way and have part of.
Yeah, you can make it walkable in certain pockets, like you have your 5 Point thing, Main Street. the
I live
hospital
off Main
area.
Street, it's really walkable, walk all over.
Yeah.
Not everyone wants that, you're right. Chrissy.
Yeah, we have to flatten the food section of the city.
Oh, yeah. Look at the parks a lot closer together, so we want that.
I worry about our, I worry the BRT is not going to move at the same pace as our general plan. And that is
Sorry, what's the BRT?
the bus rapid transit. Planning. And so I worry that our active transportation plan is according with that plan. I worry our density consideration according with that, but I also worry that the master plan and such, budget and such, is not going to be compatible for our timing. So I don't know how you address that in planning, but that disconnect on timing, I think is something that I would.
But the station locations are relatively set.
Yeah. Those are, and so is the corridor, the locally preferred route, yeah. Open up. Alternative, that's been determined already, as well as the BRT high-end stations.
But I think, is your concern that, okay, we put all this density there because we said, and we don't put a lot of parking because we said transit's coming, it doesn't show up.
That's part of my worry. My other part of my worry is state legislature is now requiring stationary plans. So we would have to build
That's my worry, too.
BRTs, and so we might upzone for all of that as well, and then it doesn't happen, or you just need a regular bus line, or anyway, so I am worried that we don't leave ourselves the flexibility to adjust to these outside jurisdictions that we can't control.
It's a great point.
So the more we know, the concern.
Well, we do need to move along. We only have a few months, so.
Well, and I think what's nice about this is that you get to already hit some of the issues and opportunities as well. See, current issues, future issues. I think we've already heard about walkability, right? We've heard about parking, parks and open space, making them more usable, more utilized. Infrastructure issues.
I think economic activity in New Jersey want to be walkable. That's I think one of the biggest issues among many. I think the big one, but there's that dichotomy of a lot of people that don't want to shop in Bountiful, they don't want to spend money down because they're elsewhere. Some people do, but a lot of people don't. Ways to address that, if there are ways to address that, maybe they're not addressable, but thinking about that.
Along those lines, it'd be nice to identify what keeps, or what are the obstacles that keep someone from investing in Bountiful, such as a developer or on a parcel downtown. Is there something that's within our control that we'd like to take advantage of? Encourage them to invest.
Yeah, because there's some projects you can start, they just kind of die.
It might be right now, but predictability. the land use plan, general plan, but now it's hard to.
That's
Hard to get their work, hard to get their work, hard to get their work.
It's hard to identify predictability, I think, in the plan that you have now. I mean, Francisco mentioned a number of things, that projects that come in, and he doesn't really even have guidance on whether that should be approved. You all don't have guidance on whether or not that should be approved. So I think step one is plan, so check that box. But I think there's other things that we can look at along the way.
I think the land use plan will help create that vision, and if the developer sees, okay, in 10 years or 5 years, it's gonna be doing this, they wanna get on the front end of that, invest their money, you know, their money's sacred to them, and if they can know that it's gonna be spent, they'll do it. We want them to have that opportunity.
And sometimes once you get that one project, it's just snowballs.
I think also talking to developers throughout this process and stakeholder interviews and engaging them throughout the process is going to be great, because we can ask them, you know, what are those barriers? What is that development process like in Bountiful compared to other cities? And what would make a development more appetizing downtown for you?
Are you setting up interviews with the main, like the main street developers or people that are involved?
We are setting up interviews with council, commission, steering committee, plus 20 others throughout the city. Some of which include Main Street. This is one. One more for me is economic opportunities from our trail development. We don't want to miss out on those.
Some trail development?
Yeah, if we follow through on our current implementation plan and spend our $2.5 million plus, if we raise more money, we're going to be on the map regarding mountain biking. We are going to be rivaling Draper and in that area. That means we're going to have a lot of visitors out here. That means we need to catch people going out to dinner and spending money in town.
You're having for the general plan, better restaurant.
A lot
How
of
about that
people
one?
want to do that. And I bet that for this first outreach push, we see a lot of what we want more of.
It's always better restaurants and Trader Joe's for some reason.
Trader
Yeah.
Joe's.
It is.
Just one thing that I thought about, and there's a little issue that happened recently, but also just thinking around the city, about looking at hazardous spaces, either that are vulnerable to natural disaster or former industrial or current industrial uses that could use some zoning mitigation that might impact our ability to, that also could impact economic development in areas that have hazardous.
Residential bullet point specifically because
From a residential standpoint, a fire.
This might go without being said, but Bountiful is a community in the state that people look at as already as doing things right. We're all very proud of Bountiful. So I think we should not lose sight and probably highlight what is working and what can we replicate for future development.
That's our exact next question. And last. I know we're getting close to that 6:40 mark. Are there any other last issues that haven't been addressed yet? And we're really looking forward to talking to you guys one-on-one as well, digging into some of these things a little bit deeper. And throughout this whole process. So,
I would like to see more trees in 20 years.
I love that.
Jesse Appleseed.
The restaurants have to.
They should.
We have one restaurant.
I think they're mutually beneficial.
Especially around where.
We have a lot of corridors and areas in the city that are wide and, did I say roads? I was thinking of roads, wide roads, those are assets that we could use for action.
I love it.
It wasn't just for fun. We
All of
implemented.
them.
It's implemented, and that's good. Still with voting instruments.
Is that our last question?
Yeah, this is our last.
If everybody's good, can I ask 2 minutes on that? one?
Oh, yeah.
Is that okay? The comments 2 minutes. All right.
You want a list of things?
Well, a list of things and like, from your perspective, how is best to reach the community? What's gonna work? Because it changes.
Concerts in the parking zone.
Yeah,
Concert
days
series.
before, days before 47, conference park, food truck.
Probably, put the food court out in the spring.
We'll have football games in the fall.
Okay, concerts in the park.
Got it.
Friday nights, those are Friday nights. Farmer's market is Thursdays.
Concerts on Friday nights.
Food truck to Friday.
Thank you.
My Constitution
Coach,
Day.
coach for kids thing, that the car show thing.
Car show. Coats
Coach
for
for
kids.
kids.
That just happened last month. so
Car showing.
Catch that next year.
It's always Father's Day.
Handcart days, that's premier, that's premier.
Yeah, you gotta be,
Quick
yeah.
Fridays is a big deal, and it's this,
That's this one.
this Friday and Saturday.
We're gonna do something.
I would say post notices like at the park and things like that, so you can.
Yeah, the park, it's the square. I mean,
Post notice.
I've been surprised when people come to the
Grocery
square.
stores. Yeah.
I've been very surprised.
The chalk art
It was full
festival.
today. The parking lot was full and we were there.
What do you think?
It occurs the day that we moved chalk art to.
June.
No, they moved it again.
First week is
First weekend,
June.
it doesn't rain.
I like
Social
posting
media.
something. I like posting something of the trailhead of Mueller Park Canyon. I think you really are trying to preserve parks and people are outdoor like,
That's a good idea.
yeah, you've always got great traffic up there.
Yeah, when schools are back in session.
School, library,
Did you
people go there.
I
see parks there.
I think that's something we need to
Other
redevelop.
That is-
Absolutely.
City newsletter goes out with their usually goes.
What?
City
City
newsletter.
And so that's monthly.
No, the physical newsletter is every other month, but the e-newsletter is sometimes.
Yeah, so we have bi-monthly newsletter and e-newsletter twice a week.
Social media.
So some parties, good EHC for like the Gingerbread Festival.
Yeah.
I feel like we're missing like a big winter. Maybe the
There's
ice
a one,
ribbon.
there's a Christmas light thing on Main Street.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
there's also in November, tree
Also
lighting,
tree
tree
lighting
lighting
and
ceremony
everything.
on Main Street.
Walking off with fun.
Did you write down football games?
We don't have a ton of grocery stores in Bountiful, so you can kind of go to 2 or 3.
Smith's Market.
Smith's, Dick's.
Yeah.
You can catch a lot, you can catch almost everybody. In Costco.
I was gonna say Costco. Costco's in West Bountiful, but you should post something there too.
I was gonna say the Black Spoon ice cream. really gets the
Oh,
crowd, On in evening.
Nelson's Frozen Fest.
Nielsen's.
Business symposium. in September.
The Blacksmith is on Main Street.
Yeah,
It's true.
so Francisco said one, the business symposium.
It's a city function. That'll take place in September.
I think it's the,
That's right.
Yeah, that's good, yeah.
That's right.
Yes.
So I'll be working in nights and holidays. Thank you.
Well, I could volunteer to help on that one, 'cause I know I'll be there.
That's nice. All right, any others?
Thank you all. And like I said, will have another opportunity at the interviews. If you didn't get everything that's and if, please feel free to email you, Francisco, and direct to us. Thank you, this is fantastic.
Can I just say, it's been really fun hanging out with city council.
Likewise.
I'm glad we're doing this. So I'm looking forward to this one.
Good, because you guys have been meeting together with us a few times, so.
Hey, Francisco, are those snacks again?
Yeah, there's snacks. Starting when we have a meeting like this without giving me something to eat.
Okay, so if anybody wants, just across the hall, right? In the kitchen, anybody wants a snack? Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Robin Simpson. It's great, and I'm excited for all of your involvement. Thank you, Francisco.
You're welcome. Thank you. And thank you for the public. We got 2 people here. Hopefully it'll just increase and next time bring.
Yeah, tell your friends.
Tell your friends.
About the general plan.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's a better way to.